Welcome to the debate. Today, we're analyzing the profound implications of recent U.S. foreign policy actions. Specifically, we're looking at the operation that led to the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and the aggressive posturing regarding strategic assets like Greenland that followed.
Right.
So the central question for us is this. Are these actions primarily a signal of a new opportunistic push for strategic resources, or are they fundamentally about enforcing international norms against, criminal state actors? My position is that the evidence we have points overwhelmingly towards strategic resource goals.
And I think I come at this from a different perspective. While the policy is certainly aggressive, I'd argue these actions are fundamentally grounded in addressing criminality and direct national security threats. We're looking at security enforcement directed at regimes that violate established international norms.
Okay, I understand the legal framework you're pointing to, but let's just examine the immediate material outcome in Venezuela. Regardless of the indictment's stated intent, the operation's success was immediately followed by an announcement that U.S.-backed authorities will turn over, 30 to 50 million barrels of oil to the U.S., and control over the profits goes directly to the president. When the financial capture is so explicitly tied to the physical capture, the motivation for resource control just seems to eclipse everything else.
That's an interesting way to connect the dots, but I think I'd frame it differently. The removal was directly linked to enforcement, because Maduro and his wife were legitimately indicted in the U.S. We're talking federal charges for bringing tons of illegal drugs into the country. The narco-trafficking charges provide the legitimate, actionable, and frankly necessary basis for all this pressure. Without that legal justification, the intervention is impossible to legitimize. The resource gain, however lucrative, is more of a secondary political consequence.
Yeah. See, that's where I'm not convinced, because the timing of the pivot is just too revealing. I mean, even members of the administration's opposition on Capitol Hill have questioned the motivation. They noted the president initially cited narco-trafficking and then immediately shifted his focus to securing and controlling the profits from those millions of barrels of oil. The speed of that financial focus suggests the legal charges served more as a prerequisite, an enabling condition, than the ultimate driver of the policy.
But national security imperatives have to be viewed broadly. They transcend simple resource grabs, especially when you're addressing systemic criminality in the hemisphere.
But if it were only about enforcing norms in Venezuela, that claim would hold more weight. But when we look at the administration's consistent pattern, what these imperatives look like globally, the resource motive becomes much harder to ignore. I mean, have you considered the explicit language used regarding Greenland? The White House confirmed discussing a range of options for acquiring it, explicitly calling it strategically important, mineral-rich, and noting that using the U.S. military is always an option. That emphasis on minerals and geopolitical capture, it sets an extremely worrying precedent.
Right. And I come at that from a slightly different angle. Greenland is a significant national security priority for reasons that do go beyond minerals, specifically Arctic monitoring and geopolitical positioning. However, I agree with you. The aggressive language around it has caused real diplomatic fallout. You have Denmark, a NATO ally, requesting an urgent meeting. So this methodology, which prioritizes U.S. leverage, it certainly risks damaging alliances, but the underlying strategic interest in the Arctic is a genuine security objective.
So, to summarize my position, the policies focus on controlling oil profits in Venezuela and the overt linking of military options to acquiring Greenland's assets. It all suggests a clear prioritization of material gain. The actions demonstrate a pattern where resource acquisition is pursued under the, let's say, guise of security.
And while the strategic and resource implications are undeniable, I'd maintain that grounding the action in Venezuela around specific federal narco-trafficking charges frames the policy as an aggressive yet legitimate enforcement of security norms against a criminal state. And that sets a very different kind of precedent than a purely opportunistic land grab, even if the methods are exceptionally coercive.
I think this debate really highlights how stated national security goals and urgent material incentives can overlap, leaving us to weigh which motivation ultimately carries the most weight based on the evidence.
Absolutely. And there's definitely more to unpack in how these security frameworks are constructed and then executed. Thanks for the discussion.